My name is Silvio. The discussion is becoming who you were meant to be. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. There is a quiet question that lives inside every human being. It whispers in moments of silence. It nudges you when you watch someone else succeed. It echoes when you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling. Is this who I'm meant to be? Not who your parents expected you to be. Not who society told you to become. Not who fear shaped you into. But who you were truly designed to become. Today, we're not talking about fantasy. We're not talking about overnight success. We are not talking about becoming famous, rich, or admired. We are talking about becoming aligned. Aligned with your values. Aligned with your strengths. Aligned with your purpose. And that journey is not glamorous. It is real. It is uncomfortable. It demands courage. But it is possible. Let me begin with a truth grounded in reality. You cannot become who you were meant to be while clinging to who you are comfortable being. Comfort is seductive. Comfort tells you that you're fine where you are. Comfort says, at least you're safe. But growth does not live in safety. Growth lives in tension, the tension between who you are and who you could become. Every great transformation in history began with dissatisfaction. When Nelson Mandela stood against injustice, he was not comfortable. When Marie Curie pursued science in a world that discouraged women from entering laboratories, she was not comfortable. When Steve Jobs returned to rebuild Apple after being fired, he was not comfortable. They were aligned with something deeper than comfort. They were aligned with purpose. And so must you be. But let's ground this in reality. Becoming who you were meant to be is not a lightning bolt moment. It is not a single revelation. It is a series of small, disciplined decisions made daily. You do not rise to your dreams. You fall to your habits. That is reality. If you want confidence, you must practice courage. If you want strength, you must practice discipline. If you want wisdom, you must practice reflection. No one becomes extraordinary accidentally. Let's talk about identity. Most people try to change their results without changing their identity. They say, I want to be successful, but they still identify as someone who procrastinates. They say, I want to be healthy, but they still see themselves as someone who quits. Here is the reality. Your life moves in the direction of the story you tell about yourself. If your internal narrative says, I'm not good enough, your behavior will follow. If it says, I always fail, your effort will shrink. But if you begin to say, I am becoming disciplined, your actions start to align. Becoming who you were meant to be begins with rewriting your internal script. And rewriting that script requires brutal honesty. You must ask yourself, where am I making excuses? Where am I blaming others? Where am I settling? Reality is not cruel. Reality is clarifying. What you refuse to confront, you cannot correct. Many people avoid this confrontation because it hurts. It exposes weaknesses. It highlights wasted time. It reveals fear. But that pain is not destruction. It is construction. When you go to the gym, your muscles tear before they grow. When you study intensely, your brain strains before it strengthens. When you build a business, you lose before you learn. Failure is not evidence that you are not meant for greatness. It is evidence that you are in the process of becoming. Consider how many setbacks preceded the breakthroughs of Thomas Edison. He did not interpret failed experiments as proof of incompetence. He interpreted them as information. That is the mindset of someone becoming. Every setback is data, not destiny. Let's speak about fear. Fear is one of the greatest barriers between you and your potential. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of success. Yes, even fear of success. Because success demands responsibility. It demands consistency. It demands visibility. Many people shrink not because they lack talent, but because they lack the courage to be seen trying. Reality check. People are too busy worrying about themselves to obsess over your mistakes. The embarrassment you fear is often exaggerated in your mind. The criticism you imagine is rarely as loud as you think. And even if it comes, so what? Every person who has ever done something meaningful has faced criticism. When Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television news, she could have accepted that label. Instead, she became a global voice. Labels are only permanent if you accept them. Becoming who you were meant to be requires rejecting the labels that limit you. Let's talk about responsibility. In today's world, it is easy to blame. Blame the economy. Blame your upbringing. Blame your boss. Blame the system. And yes, circumstances matter. Privilege and disadvantage are real. Inequality is real. Hardship is real. But here is another reality. You cannot control your starting point, but you can control your direction. Responsibility is not about denying obstacles. It is about refusing to let them define your destiny. There are individuals who began in extreme poverty and built extraordinary lives. There are others who began with every advantage and squandered it. The difference is not resources alone. It is response. How do you respond to difficulty? How do you respond to rejection? How do you respond to delay? Your response shapes your future more than your circumstances. Let's speak about time. Time is the one resource equally distributed to all. 24 hours. No one gets more. No one gets less. Yet the outcomes vary dramatically. Why? Because time multiplies whatever you invested in. Invest time in distraction, you get mediocrity. Invest time in learning, you get competence. Invest time in practice, you get mastery. Becoming who you were meant to be requires ruthless prioritization. You cannot binge distraction and expect disciplined results. You cannot scroll endlessly and expect focused ambition. You must decide what matters. And then you must align your calendar with that decision. Let's address comparison. Comparison is the thief of clarity. Social media amplifies it. You see someone's highlight reel and compare it to your behind the scenes. But here is the truth. You're not competing with their timeline. You're responsible for yours. Some people bloom early. Some bloom late. Some pivot multiple times before they find alignment. Colonel Sanders started KFC in his 60s. J.K. Rowling was rejected by multiple publishers before global success. The journeys are different. Your path will not look identical to anyone else's. And that is not a flaw. It is design. Becoming who you were meant to be requires patience. Not passive patience, active patience. The kind that works quietly while waiting. The kind that builds skills while results are invisible. Progress is often silent before it is celebrated. You may not see immediate results. You may not receive applause. But growth is happening internally long before it becomes visible externally. Let's talk about discipline. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation fluctuates. Discipline sustains. If you rely on feeling inspired, you will quit when you feel tired. If you rely on discipline, you will act regardless of mood. Reality is this. Feelings are unreliable. Systems are dependable. Build systems. Create routines. Design environments that support your goals. Remove distractions. Set boundaries. Track progress. Becoming who you were meant to be is less about grand gestures and more about consistent behavior. Now, let's speak about purpose. Many people search desperately for a single grand purpose, as if it will descend from the sky with clarity. Purpose often emerges through action, not contemplation. You discover what energizes you by trying. You discover what drains you by experiencing. You discover your strengths by testing them. Clarity comes from movement, not from overthinking. Take the course. Start the project. Build. Write. Practice. Do not wait until you feel ready. You will never feel fully ready. Readiness is often a myth created by fear. Becoming who you were meant to be also requires letting go. Letting go of toxic environments. Letting go of relationships that shrink you. Letting go of outdated versions of yourself. Growth requires pruning. A tree does not grow stronger by keeping dead branches. Not everyone is meant to go where you are going. That is not arrogance. That is reality. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, who stretch you, who speak truth to you. Growth accelerates in a right environment. And yet, there will be seasons of loneliness. When you outgrow old habits, when you decline old invitations, when you prioritize differently, you may feel isolated. But remember, temporary loneliness is often the price of long-term alignment. Now, let us speak about resilience. Life will test you. You will experience loss. You will experience failure. You will experience doubt. There will be moments when you question whether the effort is worth it. In those moments, remember this. You're allowed to rest, but you're not allowed to quit on who you are becoming. Rest is strategic. Quitting is surrender. Resilience is not loud. It is quiet determination. It is waking up after disappointment and choosing to try again. It is applying again, training again, starting again. Each time, wiser. Becoming who you were meant to be is not about perfection. Perfection is an illusion. It paralyzes action. Progress is the goal. Small daily improvements create massive long-term transformation. One more page read. One more workout completed. One more honest conversation. One more disciplined decision. These compound. Just as debt compounds negatively, discipline compounds positively. Let us talk about integrity. Who you are when no one is watching shapes who you become when everyone is watching. Integrity builds self-respect, and self-respect fuels confidence. Confidence is not loud arrogance. It is quiet trust in your preparation. You cannot outperform your self-respect for long. If you betray your own standards repeatedly, you erode your identity. If you honor your standards consistently, you strengthen it. Becoming who you were meant to be requires alignment between values and actions. Finally, understand this. There is no finish line where you suddenly arrive and declare, "I am complete." Becoming is continuous. Each level demands a new version of you. Each achievement requires expanded capacity. But that is not exhausting. It is alive. You are not designed for stagnation. You were designed for growth. And so I leave you with this. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop waiting for fear to disappear. Start where you are. Use what you have. Commit to who you are becoming. Because the greatest tragedy is not failure. The greatest tragedy is potential left unexplored. One day, years from now, you will look back at this version of yourself. You will either say, "I'm proud I tried," or "I wish I had." Choose growth. Choose discipline. Choose courage. And step boldly and realistically into the person you were always meant to become.